to the Midcoast Community Council meeting of November 14th, 2018. Will the council members introduce themselves from my left, please?
Dan Haggerty.
Chris Johnson.
Brandon Kwan.
Dave Olson.
Lisa Ketchum. Barbara Fain. Mathewson. Holy cow.
Quite all, right? And councilperson, council member Toutant is not able to be here tonight. All right, so first order on the agenda tonight is the Board of Supervisors report. Ellie, you're up.
Good evening, Midcoast Community Council and Midcoast residents. My name is Ellie Dahlman, and I'm here on behalf of Supervisor Don Horsley. And I just have two updates for you from the recent board meeting. The first is the board approved approximately $60,000 towards the Columbia Street End improvement projects. If you recall, the Princeton Street End effort that Supervisor Horsley has spearheaded, we completed the improvements at the end of Broadway, which included a couple benches and an informational sign. And this additional funding will go to supplement the previous allocation for the next street end, Columbia, which we're looking to install a beachfront access improvement there. So it will be a bit more costly and bigger of an endeavor to engineer stairs since there's quite a bit of a drop. But the good news is we have some more funding to Public Works, who will be helping us to realize that project. So we will keep you updated as more information is available about what is proposed exactly. And the second item is another Measure K allocation for the coast side. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Clipper Ridge Park in El Granada, but there were some improvements specifically to the basketball court and then some pathways, walking paths, and so just over $5,000 was approved by the board to help to improve the striping and repave the pathway and the basketball court. And those are the only two updates that I have for you this evening. I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Did you have any news for us about our concern about the 3 blocks in West Moss Beach and the highway access, direct highway access?
Yes, Supervisor Horsley's directed me to write a letter we will be sending a letter from his office to Caltrans using the content that you provided. So I will get back to you with a copy of that letter once it's sent, as well as keep you informed as we have any new information.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hold on a second. Anybody else on the council have a question?
Yes, I do. I'd like to politely request from the county if there is any data or you know anything substantial that says a underpass cannot be built at Graywell Cove due to geological situations. Be very interested in hearing, because I've heard stories, but I've never seen anything factual. I've never received anything factual regarding any geological problems in that area.
I can follow up with staff on that. I think one of the challenges is that we are already limited on funding to make that project possible, and requiring additional studies would be another cost. So I know that the MCC has some funds. I don't know if that's something that you would be interested in having them use, but I will also follow up with staff to see if that's something, if we can get something else in writing.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And we're getting a little off topic, but because Caltrans built the maintenance facility in a very similar situation for the tunnel, you could contact Caltrans and ask, because that's all public data. So you might want to do that, Dan. All right, I saw one question from the audience. Len?
For the Clipper Ridge Park, is that clearly marked as open to the whole community?
It's my understanding that it is a public park, accessible to the public, so.
Yeah, I think that changed when County Parks did a major refurbishment of it. What was it, 2 years ago now?
Yeah, it's on county land too.
Yes, the property is owned by the county. I know that County Parks does inspect the playground, as I understand.
Yeah, they did a significant refurbishment too. Okay, great. Marcia?
I was letting my dog today around the Roscoe Pier was, and there's been some rumors circulating that Supervisor Horsley is going to turn that into a dog unfriendly area.
What area was that?
Where Roscoe Pier is, was. Yeah, so, a lot of dog owners are talking about that, so I'm just wondering,
It's not, Marcia, that's really not quite appropriate to bring up here, but I will tell you that's not county property.
okay.
Yeah, I know that County Parks recently approved a dog management plan, though that applies specifically to county parks. I don't believe there's a county park in the vicinity of Romeo Pier.
Okay, thank you very much, Ellie. Ari? Sure.
Good evening, council, audience. I'm Harvey Rohrback, the Vice Mayor of Half Moon Bay, your neighbor to the south. A couple of items that I think are of interest. The election results are not official yet, but it looks very likely that Measure GG, which will allow starter plants to be grown in existing greenhouses, looks like it's going to pass. The advisory measures about full growth, retail, and manufacturer look like they all are going to fail. The tax plan to tax any cannabis issues that we're allowed to tax looks like it's overwhelmingly going to pass. So those are the cannabis-related election measures that might be of interest. The other thing that I think the Midcoast might be interested in is our local coastal plan land use update. We're going to have study sessions available to the public. We're all going to be in the new library at 7 o'clock. The next one is going to be Tuesday, November 27th, and that will be a study session about the LCP natural resources and updated biological maps. We now have good maps of where our environmentally sensitive habitat areas are, where the hazards are, and all that's available. It's online now. You're welcome to see it. December and January, we're going to have 2 more study sessions about the LCP update, and public is invited to both of those. All of them are at 7. All of them are in the community room of the library. And the last item on my list is to introduce our new city manager, Bob Nisbet. We're glad to have him on board. If you have a house on the coast, he's looking. So we want him to come, and right now he's living over the hill, but he's going to move here, and it's tough to find housing, in case you didn't know that. So if you have any leads, please tell Bob. He looks embarrassed. Any questions or comments?
Before that, I'll say welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
I think I speak on behalf of most of the community. So any questions for Howard? Okay, thanks. Does anybody else wish to speak as a government official? All right, seeing none, I will close that agenda item, and we'll move on to public comment and announcements. I have 1 speaker slip, so Greg, you guess?
There's copies for board members. My name is Greg Diegas, Montera. To the esteemed board, short timers, and to the public. When I spoke on September 26th of this year, I raised the issue of our Midcoast fire preparedness. Since then, fire has become a hot topic. I had some specific questions that are written down here, and I'll just, in the interest of brevity, highlight a few. The master plan for the Montero Water and Sanitary District contains a statement that only 39% of the nodes in the distribution system were able to provide adequate fire flow. Might have a typo in there. The reserves allocated in that plan were not detailed in amounts by location. I did a little more research. I saw that the plan only treats a 2-hour designer fire, which raises the question of what if it's bigger? What if it's more than one house in 2 hours? I found some, I guess you'd call it an algorithm at the National Fire Academy. I did some computations. If there's 3 houses involved, it would take about double the current stated capacity, about 35% of all the water that Montero stores. And if the pressure's inadequate and the fire lasts longer and takes longer to put out, and maybe went to 4 hours, it would use 70% of all the water stored, assuming in a dry month of a drought year that the water was even there. So I believe we have enough evidence that we have a problem. There are also some questions about where the reserve is stored. If the fire comes from a certain direction, can that even be accessed because of cutoffs in electricity, melting pipes, and so forth? There's a lot of uncertainty that isn't stated in the plan. And then there's the question of who makes the decision about whether or not that water gets expended to fight a fire as opposed to drinking. Now, I think the current wildfires statewide make this a priority topic, more important than the traffic that you're looking at. Unlike Las Vegas, a wildfire in Montero is not going to stay in Montero, and vice versa. El Granada, which has eucalyptus trees at elevation with low pressure, would be another tinderbox. So, since I'm not a fire professional, I wrote Chief Larkin on September 26th after this meeting and heard nothing. But of course, he's busy. All right? I also went to the Montero Water and Sanitary District Board and I presented a version of this analysis, and the board agreed to answer my questions in writing, because there are a lot of things that they don't have answers to right off the top of their head. So I'm recommending several steps in the MCC. First, if you have a current assessment of our fire preparedness Midcoast, please make it public. Second, request the county and CAL FIRE to do a current audit and assessment of our fire preparedness and state what needs to be fixed. Third, notify the county supervisors and the planning office that there's a significant fire risk here at Midcoast, and until such time as a comprehensive region-wide fire safety audit is conducted and passed, all new water connections are to be suspended. And that includes single-family homes, affordable housing, and a brewery, which would consume the water of a small town. Finally, put fire preparedness on the MCC agenda. Track it every meeting, the issues, the responses, and the results. And don't let go of it until a comprehensive audit is conducted and passed. So please take these actions immediately. I think it would be criminal if the growth in our population and community undermined our water security to the point that we lost our houses or lives in the next wildfire. After all, we're playing with fire. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take that under advisement.
Hi, my name is Karen Demore. I am a resident of Moss Beach. I'm speaking on behalf of Resist Density. I want to piggyback on the topic of wildfires. This last week has been very scary and has revealed that we have a very dangerous situation on the coast. We have one road in, through, and out. What I've passed out to you is the California Public Utilities Commission. They released their fire threat. We are surrounded by Tier 3, which is extreme fire, wildfire threat, and Tier 2, elevated wildfire threat. We could essentially be closed off, and the only escape route would be to get to the ocean if possible. So something like this just calls into question is what is the plan for the coast? How are the different agencies coordinating? How is the Midcoast and the county coordinating with Half Moon Bay city, and also we urge for MCC to put this on your agenda and how the community can get involved in evacuation plans, as well as even drills. That's what they did in Paradise. They say it saved thousands of lives, but still, that's a very tragic situation where many people were stuck in gridlock because they couldn't escape. So we urge for the MCC and the county to take this up as a serious issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to make public comment? All right, I will close public comment and move on to the consent agenda. The only item we have on the consent agenda is the minutes for October 24th, 2018. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we pass the minutes for October 24th.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approved 6-0, thank you. And we're on to the regular agenda. First item on the agenda is the Midcoast Transportation Study Session. And Council Members Ketchum will take that one.
So what do you do to make that work? I'm all plugged in here.
Go for it. I'm just moving it away.
No, there's nothing here.
Wait, there we go. Much better. Searching.
Should I plug it and unplug it again?
Yeah. And you're sure that you are sharing e-learning? Presentation notes, something?
Might want to take it out, put it back in.
I did that twice already.
Great.
TJ?
Well, always a hard reboot.
I'm trying
So, let me just talk while they're fiddling. So this agenda item is a transportation study session, and I had two presentations. I switched the order. I'm going to start with the Midcoast Highway 1 Safety and Mobility Improvement Study, because that came first. So this is the status of the 2012 action plan as of today. This is it provides concept plans for the Midcoast Highway 1 corridor. It was a two-phase public planning effort from 2009 to 2012. At the end of that, in 2012, the MCC wrote brief comments. Our priorities were pedestrian crossing with refuge island in each community, most importantly in Moss Beach, and the East Side Parallel Trail. You're not missing much because there's not many pictures in my presentation, so sorry about this whole thing. So the first project coming out of that was to determine design alternatives for crossings, medians, and left turn lanes. This was a short-term, high-priority item. And this, the design alternatives were, it was some public workshops in 2014 and 2015.
Just keep talking, Lisa. I'll tell you if I get the point where.
I hope you're all oral learners, not video, because I'm visual. But anyhow, so the project phasing that came out of that alternative study was phase 1 would be Graywell Cove, center turn lane and crossing. That currently is in the design phase, reaching the end of the design phase that went from 2016 to 2018. And also in phase 1 was a lighthouse crossing, which was then disqualified from the grant funding, as well as the Cypress northbound acceleration lane, which was not pursued. And then phase 2 was to be Moss Beach, a crossing and raised median refuge island at Virginia, and phase 3 would be Montera crossing with raised median refuge island at 2nd Street. And each of these 3 phases would proceed in sequence. One had to be completed through construction before the next one would begin. The parallel trail is determined to, so this is a midterm high priority. It's also known as the Midcoast Multimodal Trail. It's an east of highway trail connecting Midcoast communities to each other and to Half Moon Bay to extend from 2nd Street in Montera to Marauder Road in Miramar, and then of course your Half Moon Bay takes their segment. And it's in the Midcoast, it's expected to be completed in 4 segments. So the southern segment from Marauder Road to Coronado in El Granada, the design phase was from 2014 to 2018, and we expect if funding is obtained, that construction would begin in 2019. Now here I do have a nice graphic, but
So the projector itself isn't working. Keep going.
please let it be that. Well, if my computer isn't compatible with the projector, does that mean I can retire from the MCC?
We'll get you a new computer.
Okay, moving on. Well, this isn't gonna work at all. The action plan here, it's quite a big table. Maybe you just pull it up on your, show the PDF, Dave?
Is it the one on the website?
Yeah.
Okay. Give me a second. Go ahead and undo yours.
So at the end of this mobility study, an action plan was created. It's a lengthy table, and I just summarized some of it here on one page. This was in 2012, and the priorities and timeframes were considered importance, funding availability, and complexity. So there's a time frame, and then there's a priority. And there were studies and infrastructure projects. The
There you go.
Okay, keep going.
Come on, Dave. This one?
Excellent. There's a map of the, so the map shows the southern segment. You get an idea of the proportion that's,
Keep going.
well, you
I'm
just
just trying to
scrunched
get
it
it
up.
full screen.
All right, and then there's a lot of ground to cover to get to the top. Okay, next one,
Next one?
next one. There, so this is the table I was talking about. So the, under studies, we have the Comprehensive Transportation Management Plan, otherwise known as Connect the Coast Side, which has been stalled since 2016. The parking study was done fairly quickly by the National Park Service. And down here, so the items in red are the current status. Under crossings, we have Graywell Cove, portion of that in the design phase, and then the parallel trail, the southern segment being worked on, and then the coastal trail, we have completed the segment between, or the county has, between Rotisurf and the harbor. But you see over here, the time frame, short term, you know, the crossings. This was interesting too, the highway shoulder parking controls, Capistrano to Coronado, we didn't hear any more about that. But anyway, the question comes to mind, to me, fairly often, how short is a short-term project in a 25-year time frame? Clearly, we had a different concept of how quickly these things would happen. Next slide. So, this with this, so in the Highway 1 Safety Mobility Study, Moss Beach, which is unique in the Midcoast, is bisected by Highway 1. It needs a context-appropriate village circulation plan, which was provided in the mobility study, with roundabout at each end of Moss Beach, which would calm traffic without stopping it, would provide safe pedestrian crossings, one direction of traffic at a time, and convenient U-turns at each end of town to avoid making left turns onto the highway, which improves the intersection level of service. Connect the Coast side does not analyze the circulation plan for Moss Beach as a whole, but by default, it proposes an entirely different concept with 2 traffic signals and no entry definition. Next slide. So now moving on to Connect the Coast side, an overview of the project to date. So this is the project to develop the comprehensive transportation management plan. Next slide. This is required by the Coastal Commission in the Local Coastal Program Update in 2012. It's a key pending Midcoast Long Range Planning Project. It is supposed, the policy in the LCP says it should address cumulative traffic impacts of residential development on Highway 1 and 92, base the plan on analysis of projected new development at LCP build-out. I'll talk more about that later. Propose specific LCP policies designed to offset demand for all new vehicle trips generated by new residential development during commuter and recreation peak periods, and policies to offset and mitigate for significant cumulative impacts on public access to the beach. This is where the Coastal Commission is coming from. It's about keeping the beach accessible to everybody. And it's supposed to thoroughly evaluate feasibility of in lieu fee traffic mitigation program, of expansion of public transit, and development of mandatory lot merger program. So that's the land use portion. Next slide. So the study area is from Devil's Side to the south end of Half Moon Bay and from 280 to the ocean. And it's advisory only within the city of Half Moon Bay. This overview tonight will focus only on the Midcoast, and even there, it's not comprehensive, okay? It's just been a long time, and next slide. And we forget. So the project, the original timeline when it started was going to be 15 months long, from 2014 to 2015. And now, here's the actual timeline as of today. So in December 2014, there was public outreach, and we saw the build-out analysis and traffic projections report.
Keep going, I'm just gonna, I'm tired of this on the browser.
Sorry, appendices are there. All this is on the MCC webpage for this project. They include, don't look at the screen, just concentrate on what I'm saying, okay? They're gonna be a test at the end. I point out that these older documents are on our webpage because this build-out analysis in 2014 is not in the current document. You need the history there. So it's there, you can read it, and there's even a water and wastewater capacity report. And then in April 2015, we saw this evaluation of transportation alternatives to address build-out deficiencies. And I don't know if many of you were there. This was the Cypress Meadows. It was a rather contentious meeting, and the community objections led to a course correction and extension of the consultant contract. Basically, that document was not well received, and probably don't need to refer to that, except that you can see what people didn't like so that's educational. Anyway, October 2015, then they came and showed us their alternative development forecast and alternative transportation standards. And then in March 2016, that's the latest document we have. It's a recommended transportation alternative evaluation, and we finally saw some land use policy options that were evaluated. At that point, we were told that the final draft, this would be wrapped up in October of 2016, but it gets postponed incrementally ever since. Next slide. So the effect of the project delays, public outreach momentum and awareness is lost. There's been staff turnover. 2 county project managers of this project have left. It's agency staff turnover on the technical advisory committee is extensive. The project website they had with this catchy name, connectthecoastside.com, the domain expired, which members of the community discovered and reported to the county. Then the county has a page, but it's just one page and only links to the one document, the most recent one in 2016. The other project documents, the presentations that were made, comments from MCC, the Coastal Commission, public, are only found on the MCC page. Major projects proceed without guidance of long-term plans and policies like Big Wave and Cypress Point. We saw this particularly with Cypress Point, where their traffic engineer was trying to come up with mitigations, and clearly they didn't have the new information that potentially is going to be adopted on what we'll talk about next. And so they're flailing around. It would have been much easier for them if they knew what the policies were and then could work from there. And then also delay and lost opportunities for these land use options, lot merger, lot retirement, and collection of traffic fee mitigation. Development proceeds ahead without that. So, the development projections in this project, there are 2. I told you about the December 14, they looked at build-out as defined in the LCP, which is the maximum amount of development which could occur based on existing zoning. It assumes that the substandard lots of common ownership are already merged, although that hasn't started yet. And it predicts a 66% increase in Midcoast homes and apartments, or 2,600 units at build-out, although that could be constrained by available water and wastewater capacity. So then the new proposed, or in addition, I say they're going to use both of these, not clear how that fits, but anyway, the constrained development forecast just looks at to 2040, and assuming that the current growth rate limits that are in place, 40 units a year, will then be held on until that time. At that point, in 2040, there would be a if the maximum development occurred according to the growth rate, there would be a 26% increase in Midcoast residential units. Okay, transportation standards. Roadway segments, they're different for roadways or intersections. So the existing roadway standard is level of service, and it's based on the ratio between peak period traffic volume and roadway capacity, or volume over capacity. It does not take into account delay resulting from sources such as intersection control. And it provides no standards for other modes of travel. Now, the Connect the Coastside is proposing a different standard for roadway segments called the delay index. And that would be a ratio of peak period to free flow travel times. In other words, if there's no traffic and it takes you 10 minutes to get to Half Moon Bay, a delay index of 2 would allow it to take twice that long to get to Half Moon Bay. And that's if there's no bike facilities. If you add bike facilities like the parallel trail, then a delay index of 3 would be acceptable. In other words, be acceptable for it to take 3 times as long to go to your car that distance. So that's the standard they're proposing, and so this is a change, and so anybody developing, they really need to know what the outcome of this is going to be. Then transportation standards for intersections, though that's also level of service. Level of service at an intersection is based on the wait time at the controlled intersection. So if you're at a two-way stop intersection, it's based on the wait time for the people sitting at the stop sign. The county standard is LOSC, and then I don't quite get it, it's C or D. It's C, but it can be D at peak times or something like that. So for two-way stop control, which is most of what we have here in the Midcoast at the highway, it's based on the delay for minor street traffic entering the highway, and it gives priority to the delay experienced by the relatively low volume side street over the higher volume of through highway traffic. So they are recommending for the transportation standards for intersections a revised LOS, which would say that at unsignalized intersections, or the two-way stop, that have a deficient LOS, they've got it backward, it's deficient if it has if it meets the signal warrant. In other words, if there's sufficient side street volume to meet the signal warrant and it falls below D, then it's deficient. And then at a signalized intersection, generally it stays the same. It's LOSD. Does that make any sense? Okay, so the next, let's just go to the next slide, make you understand better. So basically with this, all the intersections in the Midcoast, virtually all the intersections in the Midcoast, if not now, certainly at build-out, will be below LOSD. But the only two that will meet the signal warrant, in other words, have sufficient volume coming from the side street, are California and Cypress. So my take on this is that with this standard, all the other intersections that don't meet the signal warrant, they don't have to do anything about it.
Just wait.
So there's the graphic from the report. They propose, it says signalized California and then signalized over roundabout at Cypress. Next slide. So they also have, they propose that simplify the California Highway 1 Wenke intersection and close Wenke and reroute the highway access via Valimar. That neighborhood included in there has about 75 homes. It's pretty well built out. This graphic was in the presentation in 2016, and yet the MidPen in their traffic analysis clearly was not party to this, and they were saying, oh, I have to reroute traffic from Valimar over to Wenke Way. So, like I say, it's just really awkward for everybody that this isn't finished. Also kind of interesting, I don't know if anybody remembers seeing this graphic from 2016, or I didn't even remember it until I started going through this stuff again, and what they think about that. It'd be interesting to know what people in that neighborhood think about that. Next slide. So here's another suggestion from Connect the Coast side. This wasn't suggested for anything in the Midcoast, but there was a couple of intersections in Half Moon Bay. This example is at Spindrift. Basically, it would improve the LOS at certain three-way intersections where they widen the side street approach to the highway, stripe separate lanes for right or left turn, and stripe a center acceleration lane for the vehicles turning onto the highway, making a left turn. And I just put this note on here. This is a consideration. Is this a consideration for a near-term option at Cypress, which we're going to talk about later tonight? So this is a three-way intersection, which gives you this opportunity, but this already came up about Cypress when the acceleration lane was approved with the crossings project, and the fact that Cypress on the west side has plenty of traffic, but Cypress on the inside is very low traffic volume, plus they have an adjacent side street. Okay, moving on. Part of the March 2016 recommended transportation alternatives. This one at Carlos is around 16th area. This is taken right from the safety and mobility concepts, median crossing, acceleration lane at the lighthouse, and at Carlos you can see right turn only onto the highway. This has been proposed since 2012, and it hasn't changed. Next slide. Pedestrian crossings, they recommend refuges on wide crossings, ADA compliant walking paths along the highway in the village areas would be 6 feet wide, obstruction free with pedestrian scale lighting, and additional crossings would be added to reduce the distance between crossings to half a mile in pedestrian areas. I think pedestrian areas is like in the village areas. Like I say, all these are proposed in the draft 2016. It hasn't been adopted, but it's just left hanging there. Bicycle improvements, next slide, is what you would expect, it's already in our other documents. The parallel trail throughout the Midcoast on the east side, the coastal trail, also Cypress, with Highway 1 between Airport Street, supposed to have bike improvements, and then, of course, a Class 2 bike lane on both sides of the highway. Next slide. And transit, school bus service for the school district, more frequent weekend service on Samtrans, Park and Ride Shuttle. Next slide. This is the last slide, I think. Land use policy options that were presented, I don't want to go into that tonight. This is more focused on the transportation stuff, but I just want to point out this is a really important piece of this project because that's the only hope for reducing this build-out number, is these land use policy options. MCC has commented comprehensively on some of these, the last one in particular, and those documents are there for continuity. One comment again, because it's been so long, and that's the link. You can also see where it is on the menu under Highway 1, Connect the Coast side. All the documents are there. Okay, that's it. So the point of the study session, like I say, was just to review this, a brief overview this material, because it's been so long and new people come in, you lose track. And the latest we've heard is the Connect the Coast side is going to come back to the public with a final draft early next year. And so to be ready for it, and also just whatever you want to talk about as far as the material that's here tonight. Questions on the presentation?
Anybody on the council?
Chris?
So the COSA, the Comprehensive Transportation Management Plan is just on hold. You said we expected in 2016, and it's been delayed, and it's delayed. Do we have a status on that? Is it going to be re-engaged, like we've heard Plan Princeton's going to be re-engaged, or?
Well, this delay has been incremental. Basically, you get, it's like, oh, it's 6 months out, or it's 3 months out, or it's and then at that point, no, it's 6 more months out, So there was, after 2016, we asked for the roundabout at Cypress, and they did get the consultant to do a feasibility study, but that clearly is not the reason for a 2-year delay, because they only spent like $60,000, and obviously it didn't take very long to do that study. But we can only guess, other projects were given priority or whatever it is, staff resources, and that seems the most likely thing to me, because as you look at the planning, the work plan, new stuff comes in, keeps kind of cutting in the queue, and Midcoast stuff trails behind. The most recent update I had from Joe Leclerc was about a month ago, and he said, because Rob Bartoli, the planner for the project, had left, and he needed to get up to speed on it, and he was busy with the tree thing. It wouldn't be before January.
Is Joe the planner on it now?
For now, he's in charge, yeah.
For now.
They're looking to hire somebody, I guess.
Is there anybody, is there anything in the LCP that stipulates a time frame or a deadline for this?
No, but the annual growth limit, it remains in place until the CTMP, the comprehensive transportation management is adopted. So that has to stay in place. And also, I heard this some time back when we were working on Plan Princeton, I'm not sure, somebody said that the Coastal Commission probably wouldn't accept an LCP update as big as Plan Princeton without having the comprehensive transportation plan completed, because they both sort of started up at the same time. The assumption was that, well, we need to get this done now because we want to do Princeton.
I'm sorry, if I could ask one more question. I think you addressed it in there, but one of the components of the CTMP was the land use changes, right? And so that's one of the problems with this not being resolved, is that land use decisions are being made, but the updates that were hoped for out of this, which would be substandard lot mergers, things like that, are not happening, and we're at an indefinite hold on that. Is that, I'm just trying to get a sense. Is that correct we're on an indefinite hold on the idea of, substandard lot merger as a policy?
Well, it would appear so. One of the documents on the page there is when Steve Monowitz presented this 2016 plan to the Planning Commission in May of 2016. And I was there and took notes. So these aren't minutes, but this is my recollection. And Zoe asked Steve that question, well, why can't we start these lot mergers? Why do we have to wait? And so the answer to that is in those notes. It was interesting also that there were only 3 planning commissioners there that day, but they all said they supported the MCC letter completely. And there was, right up front in that letter, it was about the land use issues is the most important piece. And it seems like, so the consultant that did the land use policy, it was just an overview. It said, here's how these things work. It didn't say, here's your policies, do this, It said, here's how these different things work. Here's how they work in that town or whatever. In Steve's presentation, which is also linked on our page, to the Planning Commission, the way he described the land use policies, I don't know, it just seemed cool to me. Like, just the fact that none of these have been adopted, it just sounds like it's not really their cup of tea. The fact that they weren't incorporated in the LCP update to begin with, and the compromise was to require this plan, it's,
Well, it seems to me that, the land use part of this, because I remember when Rob made the presentation, the land use part of it was, and we're gonna get to that. We don't really have that fleshed out. We're gonna get to that in the next big presentation we make, which never came. Is that what's holding up the whole thing?
It did finally come. It's in the March 2016, it's in there, and the link is there. It's not that long. It's by a different consultant, Diet and Body, and it gives you, you read that and get an understanding of what these things mean, how they would work, and as to whether the county will implement them, I don't know.
Is it the land use policy change that's holding this whole thing up, or
No, it's just
lack of
We don't know.
resources?
It's the
in
lack of resources being put on the project. And that was basically a first draft, whereas the rest is like 5, 6, 7 drafts. So it's by no means complete. That's not the final land use plan.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the council have questions or, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that personally, I'm disappointed that there has been 0 underpass element on the Connect the Coast side. It's known that pedestrian underpasses would improve the flow of traffic. In my opinion, it's extremely warranted here on the coast side under our current conditions. I've been on the council now since 2011, so I've been involved with all of the process of the community coming out and speaking. I am not the only one that has been advocating for pedestrian underpasses. It is true that Supervisor Horsley has not accepted any feasibility study, is frankly been against it from stage one. So I am hoping that before the Connect the Coast Side plan is complete, that there will be some feasibility studies on underpasses here on the coast. While we have been preventing any discussion of pedestrian underpasses here on the coast side, all around the country and all around the world, they have been building them. Because there is a great need. We're not the only location that has a conflict between heavy traffic flow and pedestrians needing to cross the road, with traffic flow element included. So I'm staying hopeful.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council? Well, I have one. Thank you for that very good recap, Lisa. And I think we could perhaps write a letter to Dawn and Steve asking that this be prioritized more highly at perhaps one of our future meetings, because this has been going on for way too long. I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that, but.
Well, Plan Princeton's been delayed even longer.
Yes, and actually, I personally am not too upset about that. If it's never implemented at all, I will not be at all that happy. I'm not happy with the current plan, but that's just me personally, that's not a council statement. Whereas the transportation one, I think, is quite important. And my other concern is, as you noted, until this is adopted, there's no chance of removing the 1% cap on the growth. I'm hoping that when the LCP amendment is proposed, that if anything, the cap on growth is lower than 1%, not proposed that it be removed. Because removing the cap on growth on Midcoast, in my opinion, would be a huge blunder.
You mean the 40 units?
Yep.
Oh,
Sorry, I said 1%, that's happening today. Thank you very much for the correction.
I should have mentioned the 2016 proposed draft plan that only looked out to 2040 said that the 40 units per year would stay. In other words, that plan would be, okay, we're going to adopt this transportation management plan and we're going to keep the 40 units per year. That was the proposal.
Until 2040, right?
Yeah, by shortening the time frame, instead of looking at build out as was required, by just looking at 2040, you sort of punt the problems down the road. You don't have because it's the build out number, which makes it obvious that we have to reduce that. It can't be accommodated. And if you make it look better by only looking to 2040, then that makes it easier for them not to enact these land use policies. But we don't have to worry about it until 2040 or whatever, that's the concern.
And of course, the Coastal Commission didn't ask for a 25-year, aka 2040.
No, they asked for
They
build
asked
out.
for build-out only.
Yeah.
So that was also one of the comments the MCC made several times, is that artificially limiting the horizon was a mistake. When it comes back, that will continue to be a comment, I'm sure. All right, anything else? We had one speaker slip from the audience, Leonard.
Council members, Lynn Erickson from El Granada, a former MCC member, and look forward to joining this body after the first of the year. The work on the transportation side of the planning, people in MCC might not all know, was begun actively in 2009. It was an initiative that the MCC was not involved in at all. The county was not involved at all. It came from a group called the Midcoast Coastlands, working with supervisor of the director for parks, David Holland, to bring in expertise supported by Caltrans for a grant to do the studies that were done and now referred to as the safety and mobility studies. One of the members of the early steering committee was Supervisor Horsley. At that point, he was not Supervisor Horsley, he was just Don Horsley. He was a member of the steering committee, active participant. And as you look at it now, 9 years later, if I read both the direct signals and the other signals, the Supervisor Horsley has lost interest in the projects we're talking about here for the highway. One of the great concerns initially was we were introduced to the whole concept of roundabouts, and our community was not alone in that regard. Many communities in California and across the state were sort of starting out, well, what is a roundabout? We got education, etc. And as it came forward to look at what should we do, and at this point now Supervisor Horsley was Supervisor Horsley, it was clear that in the community there was not real agreement that a roundabout would be something good to do, even if it was on the roadmap. It sat there as things to be considered. Consequently, Supervisor Horsley in his first term and a half, put considerable effort into doing studies that would deal with highway improvement without really taking on the roundabout issue. So Lisa's described some of the studies that came out of that, for medians, for crossings, etc. Some of the key things were eventually brought to a vote here in Moss Beach, and the community ultimately voted for nothing at all. They said, we don't want any of these options. From my perspective at that point, Don lost serious interest in working with us on this and turned his attention to other things. So as the community tries to pick up on this, because now we've had people come who were very much opposed to roundabouts or even crossing control, certainly the prevailing opinion you hear is if somebody said, well, we're going to have to do something at this intersection, it can either be a roundabout or a signal, but it's got to be something. The prevailing opinion seemed to be probably would rather have a roundabout. Now also in the time since we were introduced to it in many other communities, you have in the Bay Area a major roundabout project that's gone on at Stanford with 7 roundabouts, had to overcome the Board of Trustees of Stanford first being askance, but now supporting it. You can go to Lake Tahoe and find a multi-roundabout environment there. And you can go to several coastal communities in Southern California. So you have that, but more important, when you go to come up with a question of, well, should we have a signal or a roundabout? If we have to have something, a procedure that's referred to as ICE, intersection control evaluation. And so when we hear from the county, well, we decided probably California would be better served by a signal. And if you were to ask the question, well, has it gone through an ICE evaluation? Is there a formal ICE evaluation document? As Caltrans looked at it, I'm virtually certain they would say what, or no, we haven't done that. What they've done is just provide side comments to Lisa or to Dave or to myself and say, probably has to be that. So as you come into next year, you really have to sort of go back to zero to say, how do you get Supervisor Horsley on board? What are his opinions? If he feels it's not warranted, at least have the consultants or our consultants do the formal study, ask Caltrans to look at it, because it's intended to take away some of the subjectivity and either say, you got A or B, and here's how you evaluate it.
Okay, Glenn, I'm going to cut you off there because of length, and also you're getting into the next agenda item.
Just laying the groundwork.
But thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Anybody else in the audience want to comment on or ask questions on Lisa's presentation? Thank you. Carl?
Every time this comes up, and at each of the Connect the Coast Side meetings for the public, one of which was held, I think, at Cypress Gardens, that was the last one I remember, there's been considerable public input, considerable interest, but we see the lack of an overall consideration of actual physical conditions on the coast side as far as planning goes. The only document that really has much of an overall look at the coast side is the LCP. The rest of this, if we go at it as it's being gone at now, becomes a piecemealing project, and any one of those pieces is inclined to be not the best it could be because it's not taking into consideration other major factors on the coast side. The time that much of this could be addressed, and it's absolutely been stonewalled by the county every time, is with LCP revisions. The time for a more realistic build-out figure could be done in an LCP revision. We don't have to go through, wait till 2040 and see if we did okay. So that's, I would add that, well, you mentioned offset demand for new vehicle trips being required. So we currently don't have backups in some areas of the coast side. If the demand for new vehicle trips is offset, why do we have to have then these highway plugging projects? If that demand has been offset, that doesn't make any sense. I'll just mention one other thing, because I probably am going to want to comment a little bit later. Right now, there are probably somewhere between 200 and 300 hookups left for water in Montera Water and Sanitary District. And they went through years of upgrading the water system, still upgrading it, it's an ongoing process. But they also went through years of getting new water sources up there and getting them approved all the way through the Coastal Commission. It's not going to be any kind of easy deal to get more water hookups in our district. And so any kind of planning for 1,000 more units in Montera and Moss Beach or whatever is just weird. It's failing to consider what is actually there in the way of resources and so forth. It's failing to consider the highway conditions that now prevail. And so these concerns, we can never back off and give up on them, because they're essentially facts, or they're essentially truths, as near as we can get to them on the coast side. So one of the things that I'm going to probably talk about a little bit later is going at definite projects when this overall picture is so vague and cloudy. Thank you.
Well, anybody else? And I'll reply to some of your things during the roundabout discussion, and also Len's. Just giving you advance notice on that, but I'm not going to try and respond now. Any other public comment? Go to the podium, please, so it's picked up on the video, and introduce yourself.
My name is Dolores Silva. I live in Moss Beach. And I've off and on heard reference to the limitation on the number of water connections, but I've never seen it anywhere. Is that
It's in the LCP.
the number of water connections that will be?
Well, they analyze it, tell you the truth, I haven't read it carefully. I mean, but I know there's tables in there with numbers.
Right. When MWSD went to the Coastal Commission to get approval for new hookups, that was part of the analysis. And the reason it's not a hard number and it's a range is that over the years, water usage per unit has decreased.
And water
so,
availability as well.
Yeah, and there are other things in there as well, and that's why it's not a hard and fast number.
Okay, so it's kind of a derived number from various conditions.
Based on current understandings of water sources and water storage.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? Okay, we'll close that agenda item and move on to agenda item 4B, roundabout concept design for California Avenue. And this has been sort of a joint effort between Lisa and I, and other people have been involved as well. What we're talking about here primarily is committing some of the Midcoast Community Council funds. For those of you who don't know, we get a stipend of $3,000 a year. We've rarely spent it all. We earlier spent just over $5,000 with a consultant on analysis and suggested changes to the roundabout at Cypress. This one is proposing that we allocate money for a roundabout at this very high level at California Avenue in Moss Beach. So hold your question for a moment. The reason that we hired this consultant, Michael Walworth, who is both nationally and internationally known, in the first place, was that Supervisor Horsley agreed with us after various letters and discussions that the roundabout at Cypress Avenue might very well be a better answer to the traffic problems for the traffic coming out of Seal Cove already, as well as projected new traffic from various parts of the Big Wave project. And that is why we started that. The county went with their same traffic consultant they had working on Connect Coast side, DKS, and had them draw up some preliminary designs, very preliminary, on whether a roundabout could work, how big it would be, whether it would require land acquisition. And there was some joint meetings with Caltrans, and we brought our consultant out to look at that as well. So that's the history behind this. We've worked with Michael Walworth before. I don't have any presentation here. I will comment we have very round numbers, about 6,000 in the bank right now for the MCC. We will have another 3,000 for this fiscal year sometime in the near future. So roughly 9,000 total in our account. The consultant has his estimated invoices on the website if you want to look at it. Has projected about 25 hours work to do both a rough 1 and 2 lane analysis at that intersection and any additional work, and that's billed at $155 an hour, which is a bargain rate that he has agreed to for us and continues to. The 25 hours was based on a slight misunderstanding. The maps we sent him showed Paper Street, Balamar, which continued down to that same intersection prior to Monarch Highway 1 being built. So it's not going to be quite as complicated as he thought it was when he gave us that number, but it gives us a good ballpark number. So that's the background. We're not trying to do a full design. A full design would be tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is a very rough design to show whether it's likely to be feasible, and if it's likely to be feasible, whether land acquisition would be required or not. It's currently believed that for a roundabout at Cypress Avenue, a small amount of land acquisition would be required from 2 properties, one on the west side and one on the east side, and both of which are currently vacant. So that is the background on this.
Can I just add one
Sure.
piece of background? So this, Lenny Roberts, Committee for Greenfield Hills, and I met with Supervisor Horsley October 31st and had a discussion about roundabouts, and he said at the time that he was told that a roundabout was not feasible at California. And he did say he understood that they're long-term better in so many ways. I won't go to all the benefits of roundabouts, but he said it would be helpful if the MCC had funds to do this and provide a concept plan, as we did before. He said even a sketch would help. So, and I made sure I understood him correctly, and yes, he did suggest that would be helpful. So I took it up with Dave, and here we have it on the agenda.
Okay. And there is one other piece of information. As Lisa showed you in her document and coming out of the 2016 Connect Coastside document, one of the things that the county's consultants had proposed was closing Winky Way at that 5-way intersection. And when the Cypress Point traffic people came along, they said, oh, we can't possibly do a signal there without closing Winky Way. So one of the pieces of information available to our consultant, if we decide to do this, is to consider whether closing Winky Way would make the project significantly less cost or effort. One of the advantages of roundabouts is you can have more than just 4 streets. And it is still a very tough one for any of you who have turned from Winky Way onto Highway 1. It's terrifying. And for anybody has turned west onto California from northbound one, not knowing that there might be somebody coming out of Winky Way is also interesting. I've certainly encountered both of those situations multiple times. I'm sure many other people have as well. So that's our background. Brandon,
Oh,
you had a...
just one more
Sure.
thing about that. So the closing off Winky Way, just to reiterate, in 2016, Connect the Coast side said close Winky Way, and they were gonna do that even with the signal. So that's been there for several years now.
Right. And we'd all sort of miss that. Brandon?
So my first question is that I recall that we paid the consultant twice, 2 times, the first for the initial one and the second one to correct some stuff. What were the results from that, and what are we asking for him to do this time?
The DKS, the county consultants, took some of his comments into consideration. We all met, a number of people from the county, the consultants, Michael, Lisa, myself, all met out at the site to look at the various trade-offs and issues. And the result of that was the consultants changed their design somewhat. Since the project stalled at that point, there hasn't been anything beyond that.
And what are we, what specifically are we going to ask him to do at this time?
As I said, provide a very rough feasibility plan, not a plan, more of an analysis and a rough layout for both a 1-lane and a 2-lane roundabout at California.
Got it. And the last one we did was providing a rough draft.
No, it was, a lot of it was actually airfare and vehicle, because he came out to actually talk to DKS Live and visit the site. That's not being contemplated this time.
So that was just more logging.
Right.
And another question I do have is, so you said that it required a couple of those properties, including, I believe, Patrick Land, where the sign that says the Moss Beach Distillery is on. Have the owners been contacted yet?
No, because there's no plan, there's only concepts. But we did have the county's real property manager out there. At that time, that was Nicholas Calderon. And he was doing, some looking at the property and thinking about what it might cost. County doesn't like to do eminent domain. They usually try to purchase it. For one of the properties, it would have been a relatively small triangle, the one on the west side, and the other one would have been a little bit larger on the east side. But neither of them were built up or immediately adjacent to the house. And the one on the east side is a very narrow strip of land, basically a flag lot right along Highway 1, so it will not have been buildable anyway. Chris?
I think you probably covered this in your summary, but I was wondering if you could suss out like 2 or 3 points that we could consider as we're thinking about committing more funds. Like, what are 2 or 3 returns on this initial, 2 or 3 things that are providing money to the consultant and him coming up with some rudimentary drawings, concepts. How did that help the benefit the situation such that we would want to go again for California? Lisa.
Any progress toward a roundabout at Cypress would not have happened, first of all, with Supervisor Horsley's support and with Michael Warwick's input that this will work.
Because Caltrans and the county were against it previously? Or they weren't gonna put the
They
time
weren't
into?
The county, Caltrans wasn't involved. At that point, the county had not caught up with the change in Caltrans policies that now require any signalized intersection proposal to also consider a roundabout. And so the county and their consultants had not even looked at it.
The clear input we got from the community when this whole traffic signal was proposed for Big Wave was, everybody came, what we heard roundabouts. If you gotta do it, do a roundabout. That's big, and Supervisor Horsley heard that, but still, you need some technical person to say, yeah, this will work here. And obviously, we don't have that on this council, so we paid for it.
Okay, I don't mean to be flip, but just throwing it out there. Do you think theoretically, if sometime in the future money was allocated for a rudimentary drawing, a concept of an underpass at Graywell Cove, that would help the situation, that could have a similar or even if less, but still a similar impact on the thought process impasse that we seem to be at on that topic?
So
Is it an
I'll
idea that works?
I'll take that one up.
Yeah.
So, one of the reasons we hired Michael Walworth was that an existing traffic engineer who, I believe was Len Erickson actually knew, put us in touch with Michael and apparently primed him, and Michael was willing to give us a very reduced rate compared to what he would normally charge. So when we went through the whole gray whale crossing discussion here, most recently, and I think actually time before that as well, it was suggested that anybody who is interested in an undercrossing or overcrossing try and find a civil engineer with expertise in that area who was willing to work either pro bono or reduced rates. And as far as I know, nobody has followed up on that.
But in your opinion, both you and Lisa, this is a tactic that could be successful, whatever location, whatever thing it is, if the MCC or whoever is interested parties find technical expert and is possibly willing to provide that expert with funding to come up with something, to then, that has been a tactic that has been successful, at least in this roundabout situation of, breaking up the impasse and starting to move the ball forward a little bit. Yes?
My take on it is that any geological study would involve boring, which is a very high expense, unless Caltrans already has the data. So, it was also suggested that time that somebody try and get data from Caltrans probably won't be right. And I don't know that anybody's followed up on that or not. I offered to assist anybody who was interested, but
Yes.
not spearhead it myself.
Yes,
I
thank you,
think
Dick.
that theoretically,
Yeah.
the MCC stipend is so small, it doesn't really come into play much
Yeah.
in many situations, but theoretically, community raising money, such as if they wanted to pursue a financial feasibility study for a corporation or things like that, that's sort of what the county would recommend, do the fundraising, do the work. So theoretically, yeah.
Thank you.
Let's go through the council first, and I'll come back to you. David, sure.
In regards to any discussion about funding a concept plan of, or a draft concept plan of the California Highway 1 intersection roundabout, I feel it would be best to continue to move forward and have a real open discussion about Cypress, which we already started. I think it would be a bad move to put Cypress on hold and then start spending money on a different location. I've been waiting to talk about roundabouts. I'm not inherently against roundabouts, but I want the community to understand that clearly some type of metering should be incorporated, and there's been no discussion of that. So currently,
So, can I interrupt you a
yes?
sec? By metering, what are you referring to? Are you talking about measuring or metering lights?
Metering
like they have
lights.
on on-ramps?
Yes, because a roundabout, correct me if I'm wrong, would eventually equal one car from Cypress, one car from Highway 1, another car from Cypress, and that will be 50-50.
If it's a two-lane roundabout, that's not correct.
What is correct?
So for a two-lane roundabout, which is, so, let me back up, and we'll come back to you again, because you haven't finished your question. So, the original proposal that the consultants were, county's consultants were drawing up when Don asked them to consider the roundabout was for a single lane. And then there was discussion of, well, if we're doing a one lane now, we should consider future traffic growth, buy the land and do a preliminary design at least for a two-lane roundabout. The advantage of a two-lane roundabout when you have high traffic in one path and much lower traffic on the sides is that the traffic from the high traffic route takes the inner lane and the side traffic takes the outer lane, and that disturbs the main traffic flow much less than when you have a single lane. The analysis both by the county's consultants and by Michael Wallwork, based on all the traffic data we have and projected growth from various projects and as well as residential, was that there's no need to construct a two-lane roundabout now. And so what happens with a single lane roundabout, where one of them is a state highway and the other directions are not, is the way you construct the roundabout, the highway has the main path and there are yield signs at the secondary. So in the case of Cypress, if you're coming from Cypress into the roundabout, you have a yield. The traffic on Highway 1 does not have a yield. And that, so it's not a one-to-one. It can be anywhere from one-to-one at really light traffic. It could be 1 to 10. I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't know just what the variations are. But the fact is that the highway traffic doesn't stop for the side street traffic, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, well, I think that it's be very important at this time to, before we talk about any further funding of any other location, that we really present this to the public. You know, what you just said in some type of a animated flow operation so that the public can actually understand. Because frankly, I don't understand how that would work. I mean, you have essentially 4 inputs, one north, south, east, west. And to say that one has to stop, then it backs up and causes other conflicts. So it's my understanding a roundabout, as soon as you enter it, you're moving, the next guy has to yield, whichever part of the circle it is.
No, no.
If you're in the roundabout, you have the right. Anybody entering has to yield.
That's the difference between a roundabout and a traffic circle.
Right.
So the traffic
one
that's
yields to the
already
first
in
car,
doesn't yield.
but the next car has to yield to the, so it's eventually 1-to-1.
No.
So this is
That's
the-
how I see it.
so-
So I
Because
think
the
that we should have
highway-
this.
Okay, so I can tell you a number of things about it, but there's lots of videos. I can certainly present one.
Let's do that.
The other thing you can do, and I've done this, is you can go up to Fort Bragg, which has
Been there.
exactly the roundabout design that we're talking about. You
Yeah, I've done that.
you have a very low-traffic street, which is now actually a dead end on the west, Highway 1, wasn't a dead end in the past. And you have a moderately high traffic on the other side, which is near where a bunch of the lumber mills were, or most of the lumber mills has been shut down, but still fairly high traffic. And that comes in, and they yield to the traffic on Highway 1. Highway 1 traffic does not yield to anybody. And that's what would happen with a roundabout at Cypress, it's what would happen with a roundabout in California. It's the
So-
way highway roundabouts.
So
are
with the
constructed.
money that we've already invested with Wallwork, I think it's time that we, give a presentation of what he has done so far before we spend any further money.
Okay, Lisa?
I just said a couple of clarifying things about your initial comment that we should not put Cypress on hold to work on California. I wanted to clarify that there's nothing further for us to do. with the engineer at Cypress. Basically, he provided the initial concept, which got the county, coupled with Supervisor Horsley's support, to get the consultant to do the feasibility study. Then our consultant reviewed that study and offered some suggestions for improvement. What Supervisor Horsley told me a couple of weeks ago was that they have no plan, the county has no plans to do further work on that feasibility study until Caltrans gets involved, because they'll do their thing. So basically, our work is done there as far as that goes. Either the political will carry through and the funding will be obtained, or it won't. At California, we're back at the beginning stage, because somebody is saying it's not feasible there, flat out. And so just trying to break through that barrier is all, with a very simple thing. And as far as this, the metering or the explanation that you suggest, basically the feasibility study that was done, and this is posted on our website, that the county had done, and Michael Woolwork analyzed it. They have computer programs that simulate all the simulate the whole thing. And that's metering, that's how they do it. And these are, all the tables are in that report that show the flow and the level of service coming from the different sides. It's all there.
Including the difference in backups on Highway 1 at the signal versus a roundabout. And it's less with a roundabout. So I thought we had presented all that. That was the other thing I was going to say. I thought we had presented that data after the PKS. That we had another meeting here and we went through that data. Do you remember? I would have to dig through the minutes to find out. Well, yeah. But the point is, as far as Michael Woolwork and the county are concerned, Cypress is done. So I can certainly find, there are literally dozens of presentations on how roundabouts work in concept that are done often before they're built so people can see them. And then there are plenty of, you can just see videos of traffic in these roundabouts after they're built. And I will certainly say roundabouts are not universally popular by any means. Some of these projects never get built because there's such strong community opposition to them. Others get built over that opposition, and generally people have been happy with the results. Not always, and not everybody, but generally, when I've certainly gone around and talked to people in the community, when we have these past meetings, and people say, we don't want anything. And then you go, okay, well, this project is going in, they're gonna put a signal in if we do nothing. Would you rather have the signal, or would you rather have a roundabout? And then you have a lot of discussion. So I'm happy to find those videos. I don't think this is so urgent that I have to say, oh, we're gonna vote on this tonight or never. So if you would prefer to see videos of actual roundabouts or simulations of roundabouts, I'm happy to dig those up and show them at our next meeting. Do you think that would be helpful?
I do, yes.
Barbara, anybody else on the council have an opinion?
I
I
would,
mean, two people is fine, I'm just curious.
we dove deep into roundabouts, support a roundabout 2.5 years ago. And are you saying now you don't have confidence in roundabouts?
Talking about the metering, this concept specifically, okay? Because
Okay.
apparently
Okay, so
we have a misunderstanding
We're-
here on
we've
how
got Connecticut
roundabouts
Coast-
work. I've been to the one in Fort Bragg, and I do know that sometimes you have a low traffic input in a roundabout, and you got a major traffic. But when the major road has low traffic and the side road has high traffic, what's to stop it from being a one-to-one? Now, I want to talk about metering lights and the
Okay, so
potential.
metering lights are not done on roundabouts on Caltrans highways.
I believe they
Period,
could
full
be.
stop.
I believe they could be.
No,
Okay,
that's not how they do them.
so,
I'm telling you that.
So let's,
I'm not gonna propose considering it because it's not what they do.
well, don't propose to consider it. With the traffic,
And I will say, we did present those movies back the last time around, but I'm more than happy to do them again because it has been a while.
yeah, it's
Because
specifically on
I'm looking at all my notes from
the
the last time.
effect, if Cypress with the full build-out of Big Wave and at the right rush hour traffic, when car after car after car is coming on Cypress onto one, and then you've also got the same traffic on a one, how that would interact. And it's my opinion, I know you have said you disagree, it's my opinion that there should be some type of metering, so that it doesn't back up Highway 1.
Okay, Dan, what I would ask you to do, since we're obviously likely to continue this to another meeting, is go find some presentation of a roundabout that's been built on a highway, a state highway, doesn't have to be in California, with metering, and present it to us.
I probably won't do that.
Well, then, I would suggest you drop the subject.
No, I don't think that, you know, a traffic signal, right, inherently has some level of metering. You know, let's say 150 cars pass, turns red, you know, 10 cars go. So there's some type of metering, and that's what I want. So, you know, I'll tell you what, you know, I'll look around, but I don't think that you're right. I think you're right. They probably have not been incorporated with roundabouts yet. I think that they could be, and, you know, I don't want the burden to be on me to go out there and dig through the internet and come up with something. I would like to see a discussion and explain how the main flow of Highway 1 would not be impacted negatively after a full build-out,
So
the
Dan,
Big Wave.
that's a
on
different
Cypress.
statement than one-to-one. The Highway 1 traffic will be impacted if there's a roundabout. It'll be impacted two different ways. The roundabout slows traffic
I understand that.
coming into the roundabout.
I understand.
So that's an impact, even if there's no side street traffic entering whatsoever. And the second impact is, yes, if there is side street traffic entering, then Highway 1 traffic will slow down a little bit more. What the modeling shows and real traffic shows on roundabouts is the impact on the main route is significantly less than when there's a single, even if storage lanes are added. And there was no proposal for adding storage lanes in either of these two signals. Okay, Lisa?
I strongly recommend that we approve this tonight. I think time is of the essence. I think if we, if the council is having misgivings about roundabouts at this point, it undermines everything we have done to try and make this happen. I don't understand, so if something is shown about are you saying that without metering, you would not support roundabouts? Or, if you wanted to talk about, if you advocate for metering the roundabout, we could do that when they come back and dive into a more complete design. That would be part of that stage, unless you feel like you want to withdraw support for the roundabout. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, that now is the time to continue the conversation of the roundabout at Cypress before we spend more money
Well,
for the consultant.
did I said that we're done with Cypress.
Okay, and-
This
yes.
is about California. If the discussion on metering for Cypress, that would happen in the future, there's no rush, the county is not, I don't know, maybe there's news. I mean, there was something about that he was gonna speak with, Jerry Hill or whatever, but I mean, it's, our role in that is done, because this is about California, and it's important now because they're gonna bring out Connect the Coast side, maybe finally next January. I just think I hope you will support this.
I do want to say that we are not committed to ask our consultant to do what he gave us an estimate for. We could ask for only a two-lane roundabout design. We could ask for only one. We could ask for different proportions of time. And so that is possible if we want, or we could put a cap on total dollars and say, do whatever you can do within that dollar amount. Those are all things that I expected somebody to bring up, but since nobody did, I will mention that.
Well, we could do that, because based on my calculator, it's $3,750. That's 150 times 25.
That's actually not quite right. You're very close. It's 39.5250.
Oh,
We still having public comment?
We will have public comment. We're still on the council
And-
clarifications
And
and
so,
questions.
from my understanding, this whole roundabout thing came up due to the Big Wave project, which required traffic mediation, and it was either a traffic signal or a roundabout. And so my question is, regarding the Big Wave project, does it look like anything's being done?
Oh, that's not true, but let's not get into that,
Oh, okay.
please.
And I will also say that, as Supervisor Corley has mentioned a few times, and I think some other people in planning have mentioned as well, the warrant for a signal at Cypress is already met, even if not anything is ever built at Big Wave.
I'd be interested to hear some public comment at this point. We're kind of into.
Well, let me finish with the council. There's, Barbara, we've not heard anything from you. Do you want to say anything?
Well, I kind of agree with Dan, but I also agree with Lisa that the more information we have about it probably is better. We have talked about it, the roundabouts, quite a bit since I've been on the council, so I just would like to see what he has to say, I think, and then take it up after that. We would do another, you would present the findings, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right, does anybody wish to speak from the public on this? Carl, go ahead.
He didn't even know I wanted. Asked me if I wanted to go.
Oh, and before you start, Carl, I'm sorry, I promised to address one of your points, which is why are we doing anything at all if we're talking about trying to mitigate, that is, reduce traffic by having more public transportation?
It wasn't transportation, it said other means.
Any other means whatsoever. It's because the traffic is already so bad that we have to do something in a lot of people's minds. So no project is always an option, it has to be considered, but that's the rationale.
Okay. Just to that point, and I say it every time I stand up here, so I'm sorry. Montera and Moss Beach are like an island of free-flowing traffic on a messed up, plugged up coastside right now. And so the thought that we must do something isn't really there yet. We must do something if things get worse. And there are other ways of handling Cypress. Cypress was sort of forced by, you had a choice of hanging, lethal injection in a couple of years, or live out a normal life. But the living out a normal life wasn't going to be possible because of so-called Big Wave. How long ago did Big Wave get approved and then reapproved after they tried to change the approval of it and so forth? And where is it now? I don't see any building going on there. And we get going on these things, and this relates to spending money on a specific project at this time. And so, moving on to the roundabout at California, which is, by the way, how I get on and off of Highway 1 most of the time. Not going north, no. Going south, yes. from up on the hill in Moss Beach. As near as I can understand, what's forcing this issue most at this time is this affordable housing project. The affordable housing project is, with its ridiculous traffic study, I mean, anybody who looks at that, who lives in Moss Beach or anything else, would just go cross-eyed with this ridiculous traffic study that they did, the affordable housing consultants did, is anything but a certainty. And there are some of us who are going to go a long way down the line trying to fight any approval of affordable housing. And it is not approved right now. And I was here, oh gosh, it's 25 or 30 years ago now, when the affordable housing on that site was a hot issue. And it wasn't all affordable housing at that time. It was about 60 or 70% market rate, and 30 or 35% or whatever. The difference was affordable at that time. And Jack Foster Jr. and a union that owned the property and so forth and so on were pushing it through. It went through supervisors' hearings at the county level and so forth and so on. Never happened. So what I'm worried about is getting going on these plugs in our highway, because we think they're somewhat better some of the time, and getting going on specific plugs in our highway, which is currently relatively free-flowing in Montera and Moss Beach, before the situation is actually upon us that requires doing something about these things. And I think it's weekend traffic that we're mainly concerned about. You know, the roundabouts would go along nicely, 25 miles an hour or whatever they are, creating a nice 25-mile-an-hour dead zone in the middle of Moss Beach after they're in, and after if two are put in. But that's not here yet. We have a big wave project that reminds me awfully of the previous affordable housing project up here. You know, this gets tied up in financial times. You know, the real estate market goes up, the real estate market goes down, potential tenants go up, potential tenants go down. They can't get other funding for the developmentally disabled building. So if we go ahead and mess up our highway based on something that isn't happening, that doesn't seem to me to be a reasonable expenditure of money for planning or otherwise. And I don't think the amount of money you're talking about, of the Midcoast Council money, is the concern. You know, I mean, I've never heard of a consultant charging as little as $3,000 for something around here. So that's not the concern. The concern is going ahead with projects before they're really needed. And just sort of as a final statement, Pacifica has gone through round after round after round, more frequently than us, on various traffic problems. And on every time, the Caltrans projections, the Caltrans suggestions, and so forth have either been disproven or voted out by the people of Pacifica to the advantage of flow of traffic. When they voted out the widening between Valimar and Rockaway, which is an intersection problem, not a highway widening problem, they changed the timing on the lights somewhat, although it's a little bit more messed up now. And now the backup is more actually at Sharp Park Road than going through those lights. They still haven't gone to a couple of computer companies that were discovered at this time, which use technology, traffic sensing technology, and they could be going even faster through those intersections right now if this technology works. So, I would say that if we're talking about roundabouts and whatever, we're going to end up having lights forced into the conversation, I'm pretty sure, and talking about roundabouts, I would suggest that any such studies also include surface modifications that don't include lights or roundabouts or stoppage. The roundabouts would be stoppage when highway traffic volume is high. But Other surface modifications, an easier way to turn right onto Highway 1 from Cypress, or that sort of thing. And also considering the technology, traffic sensing technology that now exists and regulates traffic flow, a no project alternative. Are there ways of changing traffic flow that wouldn't require any of this stuff? And you're not going to get this out of Caltrans, but you can get it by pushing on Caltrans. Caltrans projects still have to go through the Coastal Commission. They still have to go through other procedures. These roundabouts probably will affect what the Coastal Commission would consider to be access, parallel access to the ocean. Highway 1 is considered as such, and you know, you will have challenges to these things. Thank you.
Okay, so now, before I go on, I want to try and address some of Carl's points, and I'm not intending to get in a back and forth, so I'll just try and address them, hopefully in a non-confrontational way. So nobody is proposing that these projects be built until the traffic gets worse. So the one at Cypress, the permits say when the first non-wellness center is built, if it's a building that has a significant number of people, like doctors' offices or R&D offices or whatever. If it's just storage, then it wouldn't trigger the building of the signal. Although maybe some people in Seal Cove would. And by signal, we can now say signal or roundabout, because we got the agreement, and Caltrans now requires you to do that analysis. The same thing for California Avenue. There's no proposal to build a roundabout or put in a signal at that location until Cypress Point gets the permits and is ready to start construction. And it could conceivably be and starting construction. I don't know what would happen. That'll be all part of the permits that come up at that point. So it's not a matter of doing the old Caltrans stuff that used to happen a lot in the 50s, 60s, and up into the early 70s. Well, someday there's going to be a town here, so let's put in a freeway. That's no longer the case. As far as a restriping to solve the problems, for right turns, absolutely, that's possible. But anybody turning across the highway out of Cypress to go north, that's not, there's no viable striping option that anybody has been able to come up with. We did ask, and the county agreed to pursue the idea of changing the left turn lane going southbound on 1 into Cypress on the east side into an acceleration lane for Cypress traffic coming from Seal Cove going north. And pretty much all the people that ever talked about it, and the traffic engineers, said yes, that would definitely help Seal Cove people because they only have to cross 1 lane at a time instead of 2. Same thing you see at Magellan, for example. So they would help, but they would not be sufficient if the Big Wave project was built or if Midtown was built, is the current traffic analysis. So, and what we're proposing to do is to do enough work to show that anybody proposing a signal there absolutely has to do the work to show why it should be a signal instead of a roundabout. That's the work we're proposing. We want to make sure that the roundabout option is considered as opposed to a signal. Okay. Lynn?
So sometime a few years ago, Carl was up here, and if I understood him correctly, he was asked, or at least stated, that if he was pushed against the wall and said it's roundabout or signal, which you want, he said roundabout. And listening to his comments here, I think he has not changed that position, but he certainly said, A, there's no need to rush into it, which you were stating, And B, there might be other things that come based on control of traffic flow, et cetera, that I don't think anybody would disagree with. So, the comment I want to put forward, I alluded to it a little bit, is when we were starting in 2009, roundabouts was just new. By the time we got to 2015, 16 years, or 6 years later, we heard something about intersection control evaluation. We were even involved in the review going on, although when I investigated what was happening at our TAC meetings, it didn't seem like they were very active. And in the background, the person who's advised on this, who brought us the first studies on it, at least pointed us to the resources, pointed us toward Michael Walworth, basically carries forward, it's important that we understand what is meant by the formal process of intersection control evaluation. It is meant to go from, this is really a nice drawing of the intersection, it looks right, this is sort of almost ready, it's to put it into more of a model base and to take you through a process that gives you an answer. So I think we owe ourselves to ask our consultant, who's I'm sure quite well versed in it at the national level in California, what does it do for us, where do we get there? We can also ask Caltrans for where does that stand in the process, and since the county has assured us that they believe the signal is appropriate in California, have they gone through a nice process to satisfy that requirement? Those are just good ways to protect your investment.
And I will say that DKS did have conversations with Caltrans. Caltrans did say, yes, you absolutely have to do the design analysis for the roundabout at Cypress. And
I think what's happened is it's just much more formal, even year on year.
yeah, it does, absolutely. And the requirements change. At this point, I think Caltrans has built somewhere around 15 roundabouts actually on state highways, and including roundabouts that are on off-ramps of highways, to replacing the signals at the head of off-ramps and the like. I think there's a grand total of somewhere around 60 to 70 that are either built or in the process of being constructed right now. So Caltrans now has a lot of roundabout experience. Some of them very close to what we have, including, as I think somebody mentioned it the last time we went through this, Highway 89 up in Tahoe has roundabouts on it now, and they've proven to be quite successful. There was some resistance early on. It's successful enough now that the local councils are asking Caltrans to put in more. So I think that's very similar to what we have in a lot of ways, and that they have a huge amount of tourist traffic in the summer. It's not as similar in that there's less commute traffic, but I think it's a moderately similar situation. All right, anybody else wish to ask a question or comment on this? All right. I've heard opinions all over the map. Lisa suggested we approve this tonight. Does somebody want to make a motion?
I have one more piece of background.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This $3,000 that the MCC gets from the county, this is new since about, a year or so after I came on the council. Previously, the council had never received $3,000. We submitted our receipts for reimbursement, and if we didn't spend the money at the end of that year, it was lost to us. And it was Lynn Erickson and some other members of the council that got the county to change that, and as it turns out, if we don't spend the money, the surplus then is ours to use for the benefit of the community. And it's money well spent. I can't think what else we could have spent that money on that would have been more useful. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. So I will ask again, does somebody want to make a motion?
I'll move. I don't have it open in front of me. Let me see. Okay, you do it.
I'll make a motion that we pay Michael Walworth $3,952.50. That's the top, the max.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
up
would
to-
suggest you phrase it up to that amount,
Up,
or you
okay.
could make it round numbers, 4,000, your choice.
I'll make a motion that we pay Michael Walworth no more than $3,952 for the roundabout study or design.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Do we need discussion on the motion?
Oh, wait, how much is in bank right now?
Approximately 6,000 with another 3,000 due within the next month or two.
The 6,000 in the bank is all surplus. The 3,000 to come is for the current year.
I'll just say that, I said this when we allocated the first money. I think it's a proper use of MCC funds. I'm proud to vote yes on it. And I think that, as Lisa said, it kept the roundabout discussion alive, even brought it to a forefront. And I think, I see it as placeholder again, like, let's get some concept drawings and let's keep it as an option. There may be other options, we may not end up doing it, but in my mind, after 5 years on the council, this is excellent expenditure, proper expenditure of these funds. And so, I urge people to vote yes.
So I'd just like to reiterate that I believe strongly that we owe it to the council and to the community to explain how, whatever you want, I'm using the word metering, however you want to talk about, however you want to call the way that cars would flow in and on either streets, Highway 1 would be impacted, the major flow. I think we need to explain that clearly. I've talked to a lot of community members that have concerns with roundabouts. So I just think that it's information that should be provided to the community before we take another step and spend more MCC funds on looking at a different location. That's my position.
Okay. Anybody else want to say?
And we spent how much on Walworth already?
Slightly more than 5,000.
$5,000 already on Walworth.
That was higher because he traveled from Florida. He doesn't need to travel anymore.
All right.
All right, I'll call for a vote on the motion on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Okay, 5 aye. Against? No? Okay, carries 5-1.
And I have a follow-up question on this.
Sure.
Will this be the last payment to Walworth?
I can't say that because I don't know. I can't think it likely there would be another roundabout proposed while I'm still on the council, but I would never say never.
Those are the only 2 intersections that connect the coast side, they said, that met the signal warrant for any kind of improvement.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Close agenda item 4B. We'll move on to agenda item 4C, the Cypress Highway 1 intersection. Lisa Ketchum, discussion of near-term temporary options to improve the level of service until a roundabout can be built. And I don't think there's any presentation on this one, right?
So, yeah, just going to, this is the same conversation that Lonnie Roberts and I had with Supervisor Horsley on October 31st. He said that he had recently attended a meeting with county staff and a Big Wave team where a near-term, quote-unquote, temporary option of a signal for Cypress was being considered. Lenny and I vehemently opposed that idea, and we reminded him of the near-term plan for an acceleration lane at Cypress that was approved as part of Phase 1 of the Crossings project. And in addition, I suggested at Cypress you could consider widening, this was the picture in my presentation, widening the approach to the highway so you have a lane for right-turning cars and another for left-turning cars added to that acceleration lane, that these near-term measures should improve the LOS at Cypress and would be far better received by the community than a signal. Then that's my opinion. And I told them, basically what I would like discussion and hopefully consensus tonight is that your feeling. If the county is going to proceed with a near-term temporary option at Cypress, would we prefer they go ahead with the signal they were talking about or these other measures, the acceleration lane and the widening of the approach? Or something else that people might think of. So this is just discussion in an informal sense of the room. And I would just, let me just say, I would like to not dive in to what Big Wave is proposing to do. They are pursuing building permits, they have some loans, they want to get started, and this is part of it, but I don't want that to be part of the discussion. Just the fact that all these people were in the room and the idea of a temporary signal at Cypress was in the discussion. I just wanted the supervisor to know where we stand.
I would just say, I don't know what the phrase is, if it's camel's nose under the tent or something like that, but I would be very much opposed to that idea. I like your idea of widening the lane. I remember hearing a lot of discussion during the Big Wave and other discussions of this intersection that one of the problems, especially turning southbound on one, is that the roadway there's kind of a rut and you can't make that turn. So if it was widened and improved, I think that would help out a lot. To me, a temporary signal there, without getting too much into it, we know what Big Wave has wanted there from the beginning. And they are relentless on it, on other things, and they seem to get what they want. And to me, this is another attempt to get the thing they want instead of the thing that they don't want. And a temporary signal.
That's probably 50 years.
Yeah, what is that gonna look
Yeah.
like? I mean, a
Like the
temporary
temporary
signal?
one at Frenchman's Creek?
Yeah, there you
Right,
go.
so I'm gonna go right up to, and I'm gonna say the word, but I'm gonna go right up to short of like, I feel that's disingenuous. That is temporary, light, no, that's disingenuous to me. And so, of this, I haven't heard too many other suggestions, but the expanded right turn lane, I mean, the widening it so that cars can turn left into Cypress, and you've got two lanes to go right and left as a temporary solution. Yes, because I feel that there will still need to be work there, but it will allow things to move forward and exist for a while. But if we put that signal in there, that signal's never coming out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm absolutely opposed to a quote-unquote temporary signal. If they want to do something temporary, work on making it possible to make the right turn southbound. Well, first of all, let me back up. I think we can all agree, I hope we can all agree, that the primary issue is traffic from and to Cypress on the west side. That traffic from and to Cypress on the east side is not an issue because it's a very small area, relatively speaking, whereas from the west side, it's all single cove. So I think the focus is on improving things for the west side. We already talked again earlier about the northbound acceleration lane. You mentioned earlier the right turn lane, altering the creek, not creek, the ditch area there. And we know we can't have a huge amount of traffic on Cypress because it's wrenched down through the bridge, which would be pretty expensive to change, and nobody has ever proposed doing that, even though we raised the issue during the Big Wave discussions. So, yeah, I'm in favor of restriping, and small changes to the drainage ditch over temporary signal.
Well, you're in favor of widening the approach to Cypress so that there basically is 3 lanes there? 1 incoming, 2 outgoing?
Yes.
Okay.
hold on a second, we'll finish with the council first.
Oh, one other thing, just to clarify, so this acceleration lane at Cypress, we proposed that during the crossing study. And the consultant analyzed it and said, yes, that's feasible. And in doing that, they noted the number of people turning out that would use that lane compared to the number of people southbound turning into the other, on the east side, that neighborhood on the east side, and there were like, wait, just a few cars. So they said that wouldn't be a problem. So I mean, looking at it, you could almost just close that off, but we're not saying that. You can still turn right or right out of there, but just no left turn, that, you know, it's already been analyzed by the traffic consultants for the crossing study, this concept. Sort of like a sort of three-way, turn into a sort of three-way intersection, is the idea.
Any other comments or questions from the council? Okay, public, Len?
I fully agree with what's being said, I'm just curious, does temporary equate to they believe it would be faster and cheaper to put in an intersection?
Well, I'm just having Supervisor Horsley's brief relating of the meeting he was at,
Oh,
and
so
so
you
we
weren't
didn't
there.
fill in those details.
Yeah. No, just,
They had already decided, okay, at that meeting, previously, they had decided that Big Wave would be on the hook for the cost of a signal, and that money would be put toward a roundabout. And that amount would be determined by the community development director. Apparently, at that meeting, the director said $600,000 for the signal. So in other words, Big Wave would be on the hook for that. As to whether, I think, my take on it is that Big Wave's urgency to get their building permits and get started now, they're concerned that the roundabout will take too long to develop. Now, this is just my guess, and that would be the reason or maybe the funds couldn't be found, and it would delay it, and that might delay their project somehow. And in that sense, the signal would be the only other alternative, and it could be temporary. But like I say, as soon as we heard that concept, Lenny and I said, no, anything but that. So, sorry.
Kimberly?
I'm Kimberly Williams, and I live in Moss Beach. I live on the east side. And I routinely...
Pardon, I'm the secretary. What's your name again?
Kimberly.
Kimberly, thank you.
I live on the east side, and I routinely ride my bike through Cypress across to catch the trail to the bluffs. You can't get there any other way unless you go further down and then back, or further up and around, and then you still have to go back to the highway. Unless you go up through Fitzgerald, which you're not supposed to do.
On your bike or in a car?
On my bike and on foot, and there are several others in my neighborhood who do the same thing. So I would like, as these things go forward, for us to continue to think about pedestrian and bike access, and closing off Cypress on the east side, I would not like to see as an option.
Well, we haven't proposed that, but turning the southbound left turn lane into your east side neighborhood would be transformed into an acceleration lane for people exiting from the west side. So the only change I would imagine you'd have is that you might, if you're coming southbound, you might have to go to Marine to get into your neighborhood in your car,
What about
rather
on a
than
bike?
use that, pardon?
What about on a bike?
On a bike, nothing would change. The road's not getting any wider. There's still not gonna be a crossing there. There won't be a crossing until there's a roundabout or a signal.
But what I'm telling you is that people cross now,
Yes, yes,
and they'll continue to do that.
yeah.
And I'd like you to think, even if there's a temporary solution, as to what those people will do when you have those turn lanes, or if you think about making it a three-way instead of the way it is now.
Well, the extra lane that would be added on the west side would just provide more room for the bicycles. I mean, currently there's a drainage ditch,
Have you
presumably.
ever tried to cross there on a bicycle?
I've crossed there on a horse.
It's not easy. Then you know you can wait there for
I'm
a
gonna
very
bring
long
up the
time.
Google, that intersection so we can say what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's left and right.
At any rate, I'd just like to say that's a concern of mine in all of this.
Would you
And I'd like to keep that front, that pedestrian and bicycle paths and access is really important to me.
In this case, though, when they're talking about rushing something through, would you prefer a signal?
No.
Okay, well, that's the main thing.
Okay, so what we're talking about is taking this, so north is towards the top. So we're talking about changing this currently southbound onto the east side and turning this into an acceleration lane. So the traffic coming out of Cypress can come over here into an acceleration lane and pause there before they go north. And to show you what that looks like, let me change the scale here. Trying to get down to Magellan slowly.
There were some just north of there in Moss Beach, but it's too late now.
It's too late.
Terrace and Lancaster are three ways.
So at Magellan, we have that situation.
Oh, they put their text right in the way.
They sure did.
There it is, there it is.
Okay, so, one layer larger. So you come out of Magellan here, and you go northbound, you see how there's this little triangle here? That stops, this is actually almost a two-way. Traffic going north turns in this way, and then if you're coming from Magellan and gonna go north, you come out here into this acceleration lane, which is also a storage lane, so that you get a chance to get halfway across. This doesn't make things any better for pedestrians. It doesn't make things any better for bicycles. So Magellan, of course, there's nothing on the other side, unlike Cypress. It does give you a little bit of a chance of stopping halfway across right here if you're a pedestrian or a bicycle. It is effectively a form of median, but I would not, recommend planning to stay there very long because we've all seen cars that try and use those as passing lanes. But I don't think it changes things, and certainly pedestrian and bicyclist safety at that intersection is really iffy. I know what you mean. I've been through there many times on my bike and a few times on foot. And it'd be nice if we could improve that. There was discussion of also putting a crosswalk in there.
No.
But nothing seemed to come of it at community meetings, and so that got dropped. But it was certainly in some of the concepts. And there's certainly agreement that the coastal trail basically is likely to go there for bicyclists because of the Fitzgerald closure. So we could certainly put that in any letter we write, that it would be nice to consider a pedestrian crossing as well. It can't hurt to reinforce that that is a heavily used crossing.
Yeah, I mean, there's the bike, this posted bike path comes down Ecuador and turns down Cypress and leads you right to that intersection. You follow the signs.
Yeah, I'm not trying to propose all the improvements we want for Cypress in any way. All I did was to say, wait, not a temporary signal, do this instead, that's all.
Yeah.
That these proposals are better than a temporary signal, it's all we're saying. Any other plans that were in the works, it's not about that.
And the place we're talking about where there's an issue for right turns right now is there's a ditch right here where my cursor is. And in fact, a car went into that ditch not all that long ago trying to turn right.
Yeah, the road is currently so constrained that only if one car's there, you can squeeze by, but if two cars are in the queue, you can't get past to turn right.
All
So-
right,
I guess for purposes of the discussion I wanted, maybe it's more useful, does anybody object to this, what I already told the supervisor from my point of view, that preferable to this temporary signal, the acceleration lane and widening and the two approach lanes would be preferable.
I agree with that.
I agree, and so are you proposing we write a follow-up letter?
I don't think so, I don't think we need to.
Okay. If we start hearing more, then we'll write a follow-up letter. And
Yes.
I think we can certainly say that from everything we've heard in community meetings, that the community would much rather have something other than a signal there as a temporary measure.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that because I said it on the.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
great,
After
thanks.
the fact approval of what you said.
So I have a question.
Yeah,
So let's just say you decide to do nothing. Are you just gonna do something anyways, or like we decide to take no action?
can you be a little more specific?
So if we decide to say, let's stay at the status quo, would they still do, just go ahead and?
We don't know, because we don't know what prompted this discussion of a temporary signal.
Got it.
I got an idea what problem.
And if somebody did propose a temporary signal there, Caltrans, because of ice, would still require them to do the roundabout study. So it's not gonna be fast. They will still have to do the roundabout study.
Well, yeah, it's just that it was brought up, he was at the meeting, and I wanted to let him know how he felt, and I want to make sure we all felt that way. And if we do have to revisit this and more formally write something, at least we've already got the pulse of the council.
Yep,
Okay, that's accomplished. Thank you.
thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for speaking up. Okay, I will close our regular agenda. We're on to council activity. Does anybody on the council have anything to report on meetings or whatever?
Yes, I do. Well, Dave, you were there as well. What date was that? That was November the 8th. Cosign Design Review Committee is looking at embarking on a project to update and revise the standards that are in the LCP for the Design Review District. The standards that the Cosign Design Review Committee uses to evaluate projects. We're at the beginning end of it, but we've been working on it internally for about a year. We're now holding public workshops. We just held one on the 8th. It was about 2 or 3 hours. And on the MCC meeting on the October 26th, I think it was, the last MCC meeting, CDRC made a presentation laying out what they want to do, what the proposed changes and revisions are in broad strokes that they want to make. That presentation is available on the MCC website. So this was our I think our third or fourth study session, and we're going to start having these work sessions. We're going to start having these work sessions quite frequently now. These are multi-hour sessions that are now going to be taking place before or after regularly scheduled CDRC hearings. The next one is proposed for January 10th. Dave, can I call on Carl?
I'm sorry, Stephen?
Can I call on Carl?
Oh,
He's got a
sure.
question.
Sure.
What kind of standards are you talking about? Does this get into actual zoning standards and so forth?
Yes, zoning.
Setbacks, floor area ratios, those kinds of
Everything.
things?
Yes, yeah. At this point, again, like we did in the presentation and even in our study sessions, we are now sussing out like what are the specific details in broad, what our presentation laid out in broad strokes. Like for example, we want to combine, we have two different documents we work on. We want to combine documentation. We want to look at some of the standings themselves. Site layout standards, landscaping standards, some of the specific standards that are in there, do they need to be revised, modified? But one thing that we will be looking at in regard to this project is zoning, yeah, zoning issues, yeah.
And possibly suggesting changes,
Yes,
that kind of thing.
yes.
This is very important stuff.
Yeah, so it's recognized that all of this will require an LCP amendment at a minimum.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was discussed is is deciding what's feasible and how much time and effort they want to put into this. Some of it is clearly a 10 to 15-year effort in all reality, and some of it is probably much easier. And so they may pursue both on different time frames, but that's all to be decided.
These are things that the county has repeatedly been, and just in the way they construct dickerings, been extremely resistant to changing on the coast side, failing to recognize the coast side's character. And the floor area ratios, the setbacks and so forth are what you would expect in a suburban area, a suburban subdivision over on the other side of the hill. That's where I was raised in Burlingame or something like that. And the
Okay,
reason
so
this
Carl, I'm gonna cut this off. I'm sure, you know, if you wanna talk about more to Chris afterwards, that'll be
Okay.
fine, but we're onto the council report, so, sorry for perpetuating that. You finished, Chris?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Trying to remember, I think this is our first meeting since the second Half Moon Bay Housing Forum. I attended that, I think several of the other council members.
reported on it.
I did? Okay, great. Thank you. Short-term memory losses.
So many meetings.
I know. So I think that's the end of council activity. Future agendas.
Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We need to talk about adopt a highway. To
This
plan
is the
a,
appropriate place.
workday for that. And Chris and I were looking at possibly December 1st for like an hour, maybe 2 hours.
What day of the week is that?
That's a
day?
Saturday.
So to do this, we've done our training, and we, as the leads, we have to work out kind of an action plan because, you know, the Caltrans has a lot of regulations on how they want us to do it. So we have to have a plan of how we're gonna have our team, where we're gonna drop them off so that they're working in a safe way. And anybody that wants to volunteer and be part of this needs to review a short video, a safety video. We can't let anybody out on the roadway without looking at this video. It's part of our agreement with Caltrans. And so what I think Barbara's proposing right now is we would like to do it on the first. This will be our very first one. And anybody who's interested, please send an email to me or Barbara right now as the two MCC leads for this project. I'm at chrisjohnson_MCC@gmail.com, and you can look up Barbara's on the MCC. Well, I don't have it memorized, sorry, Barbara. On the MCC website, send us emails because we're going to be out there no matter what. We're doing this. Yes, Kimberly. Kimberly, is that right?
Is this something that Surfrider should participate in?
Any member of the public, as you know, if Surfrider wants to come with 5 people from their group and we got our Surfrider shirts on, great. This is under the MCC's permit, so it'll be an MCC function, but anybody in the community, anybody, forget community, anybody that wants to join in, as long as you agree to watch the video that needs to be watched and follow the rules that were given to us by Caltrans, please. This is a community exercise. That's why we wanted to do it. We haven't identified that yet. But we can scope that at, what, 9?
Certainly like to do it early, yeah.
Yeah, 9? Let's say 9. So we would need one second, Gail. We would need people to meet with us at like 8 o'clock. So if you're looking at a commitment of 8 o'clock in the morning, meeting at the sheriff's substation in Moss Beach might be a place where we could meet. If you email us your interest, we will be getting a list going of a roster of people who'll be working that day, and we will be in contact with more information.
Yes, what area are you going to come from?
Yeah, we work from essentially,
Etheldor.
yeah, a few hundred yards south of Etheldor to 15th,
About
16th
10th Street.
10th Street in Montero.
But we will not be doing that. I wouldn't think we'll do that whole thing in one shot. Probably start at Elseldor and work our way up.
Yeah, on just one side of the highway.
Yeah.
Again, our work plan has to take into consideration our entire, where we're gonna work and how we're gonna safely get people. And I think for this first project, yeah, we're gonna take a small bite and maybe work from the southern point south of Elseldor to maybe the substation.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. And there are also areas that we, even though they're in our range, we are not allowed to work on, where there's not enough room off of the pavement for us to be, or where the slope is too steep. Again, we'll go over those things when we meet before, but anybody who's interested, Barbara Mathewson, Chris Johnson, look us up on the MCC website, send us an email, we're gathering volunteers.
So the video, is that on YouTube?
It's on Caltrans website.
Yeah, if you, again, we wanna know who's
Yeah.
gonna be with us that day, who's gonna show up, so send us an email, we'll send you the link for that video.
And then you still want to meet and speak, because I don't think the sheriff's substation is open at 8 AM on a Saturday.
We don't need to be inside, we can be
Somewhere on
informally in a
Carlo
group,
Street?
standing on the, just somewhere, off the street, out of the roadway, where we can cluster our volunteers together and go hand out the gloves and the bags and the pickers, Caltrans provides all the equipment, and say, okay, here's what's gonna happen. We're gonna walk, we're gonna take people to this point, and you're gonna walk northbound, staying 6 feet off the pavement, and we will then terminate at, Virginia or whatever. We will group there. We're gonna have a lookout, there's gonna be a lookout in both directions. All that instruction you will get prior to us moving out to the highway.
Sure sounds complicated. I did notice driving along, there's a lot of trash along Moss Beach.
A lot of
downtown Moss
trash.
Beach.
Yeah, I was thinking about it today, I noticed the same,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what we're here for. It does seem more complicated than I thought. Let's just get out there and pick stuff up. But really, once we do it one time, then it will be much more quickly organized.
Right, and it can be different people on different days, so even if you can't do December 1st, if you're interested, same thing, email the two of them, and they'll let you know the next time they schedule one. Great, thank you. Any other council activity or similar things? Okay, future agendas. Big question in my mind is, do we want a meeting on November 28th?
We should keep that open.
Well, does
That's a good
anybody
point.
have an agenda item? We always keep things open. Question is, does anybody know a reason to have a meeting on the 28th?
Nothing at this point.
Okay.
Well, if I do, I'll send an email.
Yep, that's the way it always goes. All right, and then, of course, on December 12th, we will have installation of 2 new council members and swearing in, and I have to follow up and get somebody to do the swearing in. Is there anything else that somebody has for a future agenda? That would be next year. I will also mention that sometime in January, we will have our annual council retreat, usually done on a Saturday morning, early afternoon, but that will be set up by our next chair. All right, then do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.